The headlights washed over the empty roadside like a blade of pale light. And for a moment I thought the world had gone silent. But then the taxi driver's voice cracked through the quiet. Trembling, urgent, "Don't step out here, trust me." A heartbeat later, blue lights flared around us, and the police closed in like a tightening fist. My name is Eleanor Hart, and I had never taken that route home before. A narrow road outside the city, lined with old warehouses and fog that clung too close to the ground. I wasn't afraid at first. It was just another late-night ride back from work. But the driver, a quiet man named Marcus Hale, kept glancing into the rearview mirror like he expected the night itself to follow us. I didn't know it then, but nothing about that ride was ordinary. Not the silence, not his panic, and certainly not the moment the police surrounded the car. The fog came in so quietly that I didn't notice it until the world outside. The window had blurred into soft, shapeless gray. The taxi moved through it like a slow breath, steady but uneasy, as if the road underneath wasn't entirely real. Marcus, the driver, hadn't said a word since we left the station, but his silence wasn't peaceful. It felt strained, like a rope pulled too tight between two hands. And every few minutes, he checked the rearview mirror, not to see me, but to watch the darkness behind us. I didn't know it then, but he wasn't afraid of the road ahead. He was afraid of whatever was behind us. I remember the way the seatbelt felt against my shoulder, cold, like it hadn't been touched all day. The air inside the taxi was warmer than outside, but it carried a heaviness, as if someone had forgotten to open the windows for weeks. The soft hum of the engine was the only thing holding the silence together. I had been traveling for hours. My suitcase sat beside me, leaning slightly, as though even it was tired. I wasn't heading anywhere dramatic, just home. A quiet return to a quiet life. But something about Marcus's hands made my heartbeat shift. He gripped the wheel with his fingers curled too tightly, knuckles pale and stretched, not the way a tired driver holds a wheel, more like the way someone holds on when they're waiting for a blow. I looked outside again. The fog had thickened, swallowing the horizon, leaving only the faint glow of the headlights on the empty road. Trees drifted by like tall shadows, muted, distorted, almost dreamlike. "Long night?" I asked softly, hoping to ease whatever tension he carried. He didn't answer. He didn't even look at me. Just another glance at the mirror, then another, as if he expected something to materialize right out of that gray distance. That was when the first ripple of unease passed through me. We reached the main highway, straight, open, familiar. I recognized the sign that pointed toward my town. Usually taxis followed it without thinking, but Marcus didn't. He slowed down instead, almost to a crawl. His eyes flicked toward the mirror again, then to the side window, then back to the road. Then, without warning, he turned the wheel sharply and guided the car onto a narrow, cracked side road. A path nearly swallowed by overgrown trees. I felt my breath tighten. Wasn't the turn back there?" I asked gently. He didn't nod. He didn't shake his head. He just said, almost too quietly, "This way is faster." His voice didn't match his words. It was thin, shaky, like someone trying not to wake a sleeping child. I leaned slightly, looking at the road ahead. The fog was thicker here, sitting low like a blanket, and the trees pressed closer on both sides. It didn't look like any shortcut I'd ever seen. For a few minutes, neither of us spoke. "Are you lost?" I asked after a while, keeping my voice soft, non-threatening. "No." His hands tightened. "We just can't stay on open roads right now." My skin prickled. The way he said "we," like we were suddenly on the same side of something I didn't understand, made the silence heavier. Eventually, the weight of his fear pressed too hard on my chest to ignore. I straightened up, feeling the edges of the seat beneath my palms. "Marcus," I whispered, "what are you avoiding?" This time, he didn't pretend he hadn't heard me. He didn't shrug it off or make up a quick excuse. He just exhaled, long and quiet, like he was letting go of something he'd been holding in for miles. His eyes lifted to the rearview mirror again, but the way he looked at it felt different this time. Not anxious, not frantic, more like someone finally admitting a truth they've been running from. "Not what?" he murmured. His voice cracked at the edges. "Who?" The words settled in the car like dust. I felt my pulse shift, slow at first, then faster, echoing in my ears. The fog outside pressed closer to the windows, as though trying to listen. I saw his hands tremble. A small, uncontrollable shake, barely noticeable, but enough. "Who's behind us?" I asked. His throat moved in a swallow he didn't finish. And for the first time since I entered the taxi, he looked at me through the mirror, his eyes wide, tired, and full of something that wasn't fear exactly, but a warning. He didn't answer, which felt worse than if he had. The road narrowed until it felt like we were driving through a tunnel made of trees and fog, the world shrinking into a thin strip of gray ahead of us. Every part of the car felt too small, too quiet, too aware. Marcus leaned forward slightly, peering through the windshield, his breath shallow. I watched him, watched the mirror, watched the shadows behind us melt into the fog. Somewhere far off, a sound echoed, soft, distant, impossible to place. A rumble or a hum, maybe an engine, maybe not. Marcus's grip tightened again, and in that small, breathless space, a question formed in the back of my mind. If someone was following us, how long had they been there? The warehouses rose on either side of us like sleeping giants, their windows dark, their steel ribs catching what little moonlight slipped through the fog. I remember thinking the world felt hollow there, as if someone had scooped out all the sound and left only the hum of our tires. Marcus hadn't spoken in minutes. His knuckles were white on the steering wheel. The tendons in his hands pulled tight like he was bracing for a wave no one else could see. And then I noticed it, the faint glow of headlights behind us, unmarked, unhurried, like it already knew where we were going. We were miles from the city center now, deeper into the industrial district than I ever intended to be. I had asked Marcus to take me home, just home, but somehow our drive had stretched into something else, something quieter, something wrong. The fog sat low on the ground, moving in slow curls that drifted across the road like they had a mind of their own. Every time we passed another abandoned loading dock, I felt the air shift, colder, heavier. I told myself this was just a detour, that taxi drivers took strange routes all the time. But the map on my phone disagreed. The streets we were turning onto didn't even have names listed, just blank gray space. Marcus checked the rearview mirror again. Not a casual glance, a sharp, swallowing look. His foot lifted slightly from the gas. The car slowed. Behind us, the unmarked sedan slowed too. No turn signal, no attempt to pass. Just a soft, steady shadow keeping pace with us. I didn't want to sound scared, so I kept my voice level when I asked, "Do you know them?" He didn't answer. He didn't even blink. The silence between us thickened, settling in the space like a third passenger. Somewhere deep in my chest, a tremor began. Something told me this wasn't an accident. We approached a chain-link fence and turned left into a long stretch of cracked road. I could hear the gravel clicking under the tires, each tiny stone snapping like a warning. The sedan followed again, always the same distance, always the same quiet. Marcus inhaled sharply, too loud for the stillness inside the car. His jaw kept tightening, untightening, like he was rehearsing a confession he couldn't bring himself to say. "Marcus," I whispered, "if this is the wrong route, we can turn around." His fingers twitched on the wheel. "I can't," he murmured. A heavy pause. Then he glanced at the mirror again, longer this time. "They're still there," I said softly. He nodded once, barely moving. The fog swallowed the edge of the road, and for a moment, I couldn't tell where the street ended and the empty parking lots began. Everything blended into a dull sheet of gray. When the sedan drifted closer, its headlights painted our interior with thin streaks of light, just enough for me to see the tremble in Marcus's breath. "We can call someone," I said. "My phone still has service." But he shook his head hard, too hard. "No," he said, his voice cracking. "No calling anyone. Not yet. Yet." That word slid down my spine like ice. What exactly were we waiting for? The road narrowed again as we approached a row of empty factories. The fog clung to the broken windows like damp cloth. Marcus finally spoke, but his voice was barely a whisper. "They're not here for you." I turned toward him slowly, not sure I heard correctly. "What do you mean?" "Not for me?" His breathing turned uneven, shaky in a way that made the small space of the car feel even tighter. He swallowed. "Once, twice. They've been following me since last week," he said. I stared at him. The wheel shook slightly under his hands. I looked back at the sedan. Its lights dimmed as if on cue, almost like it didn't want to be noticed, almost like it was entertained by our fear. "Marcus," I said quietly, "who are they?" He didn't answer at first. The silence stretched long enough for my heart to fill every corner of my body with heat and dread. When he finally spoke, It was so soft I wasn't sure the car hadn't breathed the words itself. "I messed up," he whispered. "I thought I could fix it before anyone noticed." "Fix what?" He never said. But the way he pressed his foot down on the gas, the way he tightened his grip again, it told me the mistake was not small, not simple, not survivable. And the car behind us, it didn't want him to fix anything. The road curved sharply, dipping into a stretch of darkness that even the fog didn't dare cross. Marcus turned the headlights to high beam, but it barely made a dent. The sedan followed, always there, always steady, like a shadow stitched to our bumper. I held the edge of my seat as the road fell away beneath us and whispered, "Marcus, just tell me what you did." He didn't answer, but I saw his reflection in the window, eyes wide, hollow, and it was enough to know the truth was worse than anything I could imagine. The fog thickened again, swallowing the edges of the world, and for the first time I realized someone wasn't going to make it to the end of this road. The road should have been empty at that hour, but the darkness felt crowded, like something unseen was breathing just beyond the fog. I remember the way the headlights carved thin paths through the mist, catching the edges of old warehouses and abandoned fences. Everything looked washed out, colorless, as if the night had forgotten how to hold warmth. And then, just as I was settling into the hum of the engine, the glow behind us flickered. A pair of headlights, far back, too steady, too deliberate, as if watching us, rather than following. That was the moment my pulse began to change. Marcus hadn't spoken in nearly 10 minutes. Not a word. He kept his gaze fixed on the road, shoulders stiff, jaw tight enough to tremble. The taxi's air felt dense, like the cold had seeped through the windows and settled between us. Outside, the industrial district stretched out like a forgotten skeleton. Old brick buildings, rusted gates, long shadows that moved when nothing touched them. I pulled my coat tighter around my ribs. The silence wasn't peaceful anymore. It felt suspended. That's when I saw it again. The same pair of headlights from before, closer now. A low, cautious glow, floating through the fog like an animal stalking us. I watched Marcus's hands. He didn't just grip the wheel, he clenched it, his knuckles pale, his fingertips trembling against the leather. Every few seconds he glanced at the rearview mirror. Just a flick of his eyes, but sharp enough to cut through the dark. "Marcus," I whispered, not sure what I was asking. He still didn't answer, but the air shifted around him, tightening like a rope being pulled from both ends. Something wasn't right. Something was already closing in on us. And I could feel it before I fully understood it. The unmarked car drifted closer, its headlights pressing against the back of our taxi like two fingers poking. Through cloth, it didn't honk, didn't flash its lights, didn't attempt to pass. It just stayed behind us, unwavering. "Marcus," I said again, this time a little firmer. He inhaled sharply, as if the air itself hurt him. We reached an intersection, one of those neglected crossroads, with broken traffic signals and peeling street signs. Marcus slowed, not enough to stop, just enough to think. But before he could turn, the headlights surged, then disappeared. Not gone, just gone from behind us. "Where?" I began. Then I saw it. The unmarked car materialized from the fog, parked sideways across the road ahead, its silhouette stretching across both lanes. Marcus slammed the brakes. My body lurched forward, caught by the seatbelt just in time. The world tilted for a second, tires squealing, glass rattling, my breath catching in my throat. Red and blue lights exploded into the night. From both sides, behind us, in front of us, reflections bounced off the fog, turning the air into a trembling, frantic storm of color. We were boxed in, completely. Instinct told me to reach for the door, not to run, just step out, explain, ask what was happening. But before my fingers could even graze the handle, Marcus caught my arm. Not aggressively, not harshly, just with a desperation that startled me more than the lights outside. "Don't step out here," he whispered, his voice cracking like thin ice. "Trust me." I froze. His eyes weren't pleading, they were warning. And there was something else buried in them. Guilt. A heavy kind of guilt. The kind that doesn't come from fear of punishment, but from fear of someone else paying for your mistakes. Outside, shadows moved. Shouts, footsteps, doors slamming. The police weren't charging toward us. They were positioning, like hunters cornering something dangerous. "Marcus," I whispered, my throat tight. "What did you do?" He shut his eyes for a second, long enough for the silence to grow sharp. When he opened them, he didn't look at me. He looked past me, through me, as if remembering a moment he wished he could undo. "They're not here for you," he said quietly. "Or even for us." Then he swallowed hard. "They're here because of who found me." The words felt like a hinge unlocking. Something about his voice, low, hollow, already defeated, made it clear. This wasn't just fear of the police. This was fear of being caught by something worse. The lights outside blurred against the window, turning Marcus's reflection into a fractured shape. Tired eyes, clenched jaw, a man running out of places to hide. The officers weren't yelling. They weren't threatening. They were just waiting, like they knew he'd break before they had to speak. Marcus released my arm slowly, almost with regret. "I'm sorry, Eleanor," he murmured, voice trembling. "I never meant for you to be pulled into this." "Pulled into what?" I almost asked, but the words faded on my tongue. Because in that moment, with the fog pressing against the windshield and the sirens humming like distant thunder, I realized something chilling. If this was the moment Marcus feared most, then the real danger hadn't even started. The red and blue lights washed over the dashboard like restless tides, rising and falling against the cracked vinyl. I remember thinking how strange it was, that something so bright could make the night feel darker. Marcus had both hands on the wheel, knuckles pale, breaths clipped and shallow. He didn't look at me. Outside, voices were shouting, sharp, rehearsed, metallic. Inside, it felt like the world was holding its breath. And somewhere between the flicker of police lights and the hum of the engine dying, I realized I didn't know the man sitting beside me at all. The windows shook with every command the officers yelled. But inside the taxi, everything stayed unnaturally still, like the air refused to move until the truth did. I pressed my back into the seat, my palms damp against the fabric. It smelled of old pine air freshener and something tired, like rain that had dried a long time ago. Marcus's chest rose unevenly, almost as if he didn't trust the next breath to arrive. He kept staring straight ahead, not at the guns pointed toward the windshield, not at the lights, but at some far-off memory I didn't understand. "Marcus," I whispered. My voice surprised me, thin but steady. Still, he didn't answer. A thud hit the back of the car, and one of the officers shouted again, telling us to keep our hands visible. Marcus lifted his trembling hands, just enough to show compliance. The water in my throat lifted like a knot. I should have been begging to get out. I should have been screaming. But the look in Marcus's eyes, it wasn't the look of someone caught. It was the look of someone cornered, and that difference pressed into me like a second heartbeat. When Marcus finally spoke, it was barely a breath, a thread of sound slipping between us. "Eleanor, don't panic." He said it like a plea, not advice. The police kept shouting, words like hands, freeze, vehicle driver, but they blurred together, folding into the fog that pressed against the glass. I leaned forward slightly, careful, wanting to see his face in the shifting lights. Then he said it, not loudly, not even clearly, just enough for it to reach me and settle into my bones. "They're not here because of you, or because of what you think." The world outside didn't pause, but I did. "What do you mean?" I whispered. He swallowed hard, eyes flicking toward the mirrors, not at the police, but past them, as if looking for someone else entirely. "Someone used my cab," he murmured. "Used it to move something, or someone, I don't know. But they pinned it on me. They made sure everything pointed back here." A hollow click echoed in his throat. "My plates, my route logs, even my shifts." A tremor shook through him then, barely visible, but enough to splinter whatever certainty I had left. Marcus lowered his voice further, as if afraid the night itself was listening. "I kept thinking I'd find a way to fix it," he said. "Explain it. Show someone I wasn't involved." He blinked hard, and a sheen of sweat caught the police lights like tiny shards of glass. But every time I tried to go somewhere safe, someone followed. Someone who wasn't the police. Someone who wanted me panicked, running. My fingers curled against my lap. The pieces didn't fit, not cleanly. But the fear in his voice wasn't theatrical. It was quiet, heavy, worn down. "What did they use your taxi for?" I asked. He shook his head. "I never saw." "That's the problem. I never saw anything. But they made sure the police would think I did." The officer shouted again, commanding him to exit the vehicle. Marcus flinched, not at the command, but at the certainty of it. Then he looked at me. Really looked. "Eleanor, if you get out now, they'll think you're part of this." You were in the cab, with me. His voice cracked, soft, terrified. I'm not asking you to trust me. I'm asking you not to trust them. For a split second, everything in the world narrowed. The lights, the noise, the cold glass of the window against my arm. And his words hung there, trembling. The officer nearest the windshield stepped forward, gun raised, shouting for Marcus to open the door. The handle rattled under the pressure of the night. Marcus's hands hovered in the air, empty, shaking. Outside, the police lights carved sharp lines across the pavement. Inside, my breath fogged the glass, blurring the world beyond it. I should have reached for the door. I should have stepped out and let the truth sort itself. But Marcus whispered one last thing, so quietly I almost missed it. They framed the wrong person, Eleanor. And whoever did it isn't out there with a badge. The words settled deep, cold, certain, unavoidable. And as the officer approached the door, his shadow stretching across the hood, I realized this night wasn't nearly over. The night had that kind of quiet that doesn't belong to a city. Too soft, too expectant, as if every streetlight was holding its breath. I remember the way the police headlights washed over the windshield, white and cold, like someone pulling a sheet over a body. Marcus's hands tightened around the steering wheel, though the engine was already off. He whispered, "Don't get out, please." Not loud, not desperate, just a man whose world was closing in on him. And in the glass, I could see myself reflected, caught between fear and something I couldn't yet name. The air inside the car felt heavy, like a room sealed too long. My palms rested on my knees, steady but cold. I could hear my own breath, thin, uncertain, and above it, the soft static of a radio from one of the patrol cars. Voices blurred together, calm and organized, while everything inside me felt anything but. The officers moved slowly toward us, silhouettes framed in blue and red light. Their boots made dull thuds against the pavement, each one sounding like a question they hadn't asked yet. Marcus didn't look at me. He stared straight ahead, jaw tight, lashes trembling, a grown man trying not to sound scared. "You said you trusted me," he murmured, barely audible. It wasn't a challenge, just a reminder, or maybe a plea. I didn't answer because the truth was, I didn't know anymore. The taxi smelled faintly of mint gum and last night's rain. The seatbelt strap scratched against my shoulder. Every tiny detail felt sharper, as if the moment itself wanted to be remembered. Outside, the officers lifted their flashlights. One beam slid across my window, stopping just long enough for me to understand. They weren't sure what we were. Victims? Suspects? Something in between? And in that limbo, I could feel a choice forming, one I wasn't ready to make. It happened in a blink, just a tilt of my head, just low enough to see beneath the driver's seat. A small blink of light, faint, rhythmic, wrong. At first, I thought it was a reflection from the patrol car behind us. But reflections don't pulse like breathing. Reflections don't hide themselves in shadows. I leaned slightly forward, my fingers brushing the seat's fabric. The blinking didn't stop. Marcus noticed my movement. "Don't!" His voice cracked mid-whisper. That was when I realized he wasn't reaching for it. He wasn't even trying to hide it. He just looked defeated. The officers were close now, 10 feet, maybe less. Their hands hovered near their belts, not threatening, just prepared. I kept my eyes on the device. Square, black, about the size of a deck of cards. Not something someone forgets. Not something someone drops by accident. Evidence, placed where Marcus couldn't reach it. But where I could, my heart stopped racing. It slowed, centered, as if something inside me finally understood the shape of the moment. Someone wanted Marcus caught. Someone wanted me caught with him. The truth wasn't in his eyes or the police lights. It was blinking quietly under my feet. One of the officers tapped on my window. The sound was gentle, almost polite. "Ma'am, we need you to step out slowly." Marcus shook his head, small, almost invisible. Not begging, just bracing. I placed my hand on the door handle but didn't pull it. "Not yet." The officer tried again. "It's okay. You're safe." The funny thing was, safety felt farther away than ever. I looked at Marcus. Really looked. There was no anger in him. No calculation. Just a man sitting too still, as if any movement might break him completely. His voice came quiet. "If you get out, they'll say I forced you. If you stay, they'll say you're with me." He wasn't wrong. Every door in front of me led somewhere dark. I leaned closer, lowering my voice. "What did you do?" He swallowed. "Nothing they can prove. Nothing I can explain fast enough." A pause, but something someone once buried. Evidence planted. A story pre-written. A trap already sprung. The officer's silhouette shifted. Another tap on the window, firmer this time. And suddenly the world felt small. Just me, Marcus, and a choice carved into a single breath. Truth isn't always the louder voice. Sometimes it's the quieter one. The one whispering from the floor of a taxi in the middle of the night. I opened the door. Not fully, just enough for the night air to slip in and sit beside me. The officers stepped back, waiting, their faces unreadable under the flashing lights. My foot stayed inside. My hand stayed on the frame, half in safety, half in danger. Balanced on a truth only I had seen. Marcus didn't speak. He simply exhaled, a sound so soft it felt like the end of something. And in that thin, fragile pause, I understood. It wasn't about choosing him, or them. It was about choosing the path where the real story lived. So I lifted my chin, looked the nearest officer in the eye, and stepped into the truth I was willing to carry, whatever it cost.